So Thandar came in and said, I saw KCD2 turned profitable after day one sales, which is pretty incredible. So yeah, Daniel Varva did an interview, I guess, with some Czech news sites, and was saying that essentially day one sales for this. So this game sold 1 million copies, more than 1 million copies in its first day, right? Just right out of the gate. So, despite all of the efforts of the man babies to try to, say that this game is woke and all this other stuff, um, it turned a profit with day one sales, essentially. He's going to be over here in the background making a bunch of noise while I talk, but oh well.
Good doggy, good boy.
Good doggy, good boy. Anyway, what's really interesting, and this is the discussion I wanted to have this morning, is the cost to make this game was reportedly around 40 to 41 million US dollars. And they made that back with day one sales essentially. So broke a million sales, made their money back, and now everything else is gravy. And there's a couple of things I want to point out here. One is which this is I'm pretty sure it's Cromwell, I think is his name. It's the head of publishing for Larian Studios, was talking about, this is the rise of the Euro publisher. So we're seeing this massive surge in recent years, whether it's, Baldur's Gate 3 or Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, but we're seeing these really, you know, big, sprawling RPGs coming out of Europe that are dominating the global sales charts, dominating the awards ceremonies, and proving to the world that you can make really huge games on what the US market would consider to be a shoestring budget. And this is very this a lot of this ties into, right, so the EA conversation about how um, live action games are more popular than single player RPGs, and the numbers for that are proven, and there's a reason why Dragon Age Veilguard didn't do well, and it's because it wasn't live action and all this other stuff. That's just not true. Single player RPGs, there is still a very good market for those, but there are a few things that have to happen. One is that it has to be focused. That game has to be focused on being a single player RPG from day one. You can't start building a live service game, spend 10 years trying to make it a live service game, then decide you're going to scrap that and try to salvage it and make a single player RPG out of it and expect it to do as well as a game that was built from the ground up to be a single player RPG from the get go without microtransactions or anything else. So I'm getting sidetracked though, because the thing I wanted to talk about was the cost of development and salaries,
Good to
because
see you.
inflation is so massive in the United States that games that are built in the US, specifically we're talking games that are made in like Austin, Texas or Los Angeles, these areas have cost of living prices that are
Maybe
just
next time.
astronomical. And so it'll cost conservatively $250 million in the US to make a game that you could make in Europe for under $50 million. So looking at Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, this being a game that was supposedly, we don't know the exact numbers, but the numbers that are being thrown around are $40 million essentially. Um, the fact that you can build a game like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 for 40 million US dollars, this is something that on a worldwide basis, game studios have to pay attention to, because you can't keep expecting to make these massive. I mean, if you look at games like, I think it was what, Suicide Squad 2 last year, they spent hundreds of billions and it failed astronomically. Conquered, what was the rumored budget for Conquered? Um, I'm gonna go look this up really quick. A new report from Forbes says Concord cost $400 million to make, and that's the total budget. That's like marketing and everything else. It says this is from IGN. Initial development was around 200 million, but then all the costs inflated over the cost of that. So you can look at, and again, the reported budget. Nobody knows if that's the actual. That's the reported from Forbes, IGN, all these other news outlets. So if you look at a game like Concord, which you can talk about all the reasons why Concord failed. We can argue until we're blue in the face about all of the reasons that that game failed. But one of the things, just the stark difference right out of the gate, is Concord cost 400 million. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 cost 40. And this has nothing to do whether or not a game is successful or a failure. That's not what this conversation is about. What this
Beautiful.
conversation is about is the fact that you can build a game like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which I would argue looks as good as every AAA game out there right now, and it was built for a fraction of the budget that most US-based companies or AAA publishers would spend to make their games. So these are the types of things that fascinate me because you can clearly build a game for much less, but you can't do it if you're going to be building it in the US where people's salaries are jacked up because of inflation and the cost of real estate and the cost of everything. Like every middle management person in the US who's sucking up resources because they're there in a middle management position with a $150,000 a year salary. And what are they doing? They're managing a spreadsheet. Um, it's Devon says this is what Bethesda used to be. Well, I would argue that Bethesda is also a case study in the they are the result of their own success. They are a California-based company, so they are based in a state. This is no different than Naughty Dog or any of the California-based companies. If you are based in the state of California, your taxes are astronomical, the cost of living is astronomical, and as a result, yeah, but you can't say that anymore. They are. I totally get where you're coming from, but you can't say it like that anymore. We have to say too many cooks in the kitchen. 20 years ago, we could say it that way. Um, anyway, Bethesda is a case study because I love Bethesda games. Bethesda has become it's located in a place where it costs way more to make their games than it could cost if they were based in Europe or somewhere else. And I think that's looking at Warhorse and Larian as examples of, reportedly Baldur's Gate 3 cost a lot more than $40 million to make. But if you can build a game like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 for 50 million or less, that same game is probably going to cost you, like I said, $250,000 to make in the United States. That's especially when you're looking at the amount of sales you need to recoup your cost of development. If you need, as in the case of Concord, if you need to make $500 million to break even and to make a profit, that's not sustainable. Like, what company can sustain that? Um, like, nobody can sustain that. Whereas if you can spend, it took them what, 7 years to develop? I think they said 7 years for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 7 years. So if we take that budget, I got to break out a calculator because my brain hurts. Let's say $40 million divided by 7. That's $5.7 million per year that you have to cover for salaries. Um, that's way more sustainable than, say, a game like Concord, which reportedly cost $400 million. If we break that down on a per year basis, you're spending $57 million, but it's 10 times more. 10 times more what you need to make that game. And Concord wasn't even as big of a game in terms of scope and size and scale. So, and I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, Concord's a bad faith argument because it failed for all these other reasons. I'm just using the budget. I'm not talking about whether the game succeeded or failed. I'm using the budget numbers. Also, a game like, how much? What was the budget for Red Dead Redemption 2? RDR2 budget. Red Dead Redemption 2 reportedly cost between 370 and 540 million dollars to make. Why? Because it's a US based company. So the salaries cost so much more. I would argue that this game is KCD2 is every bit as big and as impressive as Red Dead Redemption 2. I would argue that. And right, because it's Rockstar. And so the salaries, right? You've got big executives, you've got middle management, you have a United States company where inflation is out the roof and the salaries are out the roof as well. So having a European company where the salaries are much less. We had a discussion about this. I can't. It was last year. I don't remember what game we were playing, but we were talking. There were some game devs in our chat who were from the UK, and they were talking about how from the UK you could do a direct comparison. It was when we were playing No Man's Sky. We were playing No Man's Sky. We were talking about how can Hello Games continue to offer these updates for No Man's Sky for free when every other game like Bethesda charges for their DLC. And the reality is that A, No Man's Sky is independent with around, I believe, 50 employees, and B, because they are in a place where the salaries are much less, they can be sustainable with far fewer sales because they're not needing to generate hundreds of millions of dollars of profit to be profitable. And there's no shareholders involved. So and by the way, Warhorse Studios is not an independent studio. They are owned by, partially owned by investor corps and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of factors into this. The point I wanted to get back to though is the budget and the reason why European RPGs are, and I hope it continues. I hope the trend continues because we have the Dawnstar coming out uh, whenever, and that's another Czech company, and I would anticipate you're probably going to see that game having a 30 to 50 billion dollar budget as well. So it's much easier for these European RPG studios to have a profitable RPG with only 1 million sales, whereas a company like Rockstar needs to sell 30 million copies to be profitable. Right, Blood of the Dawnwalker, that's the big one. Jason Live says budget for Farming Simulator 25 was 1.4 billion. Artemis says imagine the budget on GTA 6. Yeah, these are all again US companies and absolutely looking at the budgets and so on and so forth. So it's it's just a cost thing, and it's going to be next to impossible for US based companies to compete because it just costs so much more. So they need to make, if it's costing a European studio 50 million or less and it's costing an American studio $250,000 for the same type of game and same development times, there's just no comparison. So if I was an investor, I would not be investing in US based gaming companies at this point. I would be investing all of my money in European RPG studios because until inflation catches up and everything else, I think you're going to see more success stories like what we're seeing here. I think that the Dawnwalker is going to be a really good example once that finally launches. I think we're going to see a similar story to what we're seeing here in terms of, you know, sales numbers recouping on day one as opposed to taking 2 years to recoup sales and being able to be profitable on 1 million sales as opposed to 30 million. I think that's a big difference. Anyway, great conversation to start off the morning. I haven't even finished my first cup of coffee, so this is why you tune in live, everybody, so you can talk about things like this with us during the live streams. Like, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Daily streams on YouTube and Twitch, usually starting around 6 a.m. Central. So hopefully we'll see you in the next one. And the stream continues on. This will get clipped out for YouTube later. That was a good conversation early in the morning. Tonda says, was buying KCD a good investment? Why wouldn't it be? It's a video game. Why would I regret buying a video game?